Good morning, everybody. Well, how's everybody doing from the TikTok ban? Here we are on IG, and my name is Tiffany Toda, and I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've started the Community for International Arab, and every Sunday, it's City Sunday, named after my beloved great-grandmother, Maria. And we are going to talk about Arab culture and our relationships. Welcome, everybody. If the people that are joining, if you don't mind just perhaps putting in the chat where you're from, I always like to see where people are dialing in from as we start to build our community. It's great to know where people are from if you feel comfortable. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Tiffany Toda. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I am based in Los Angeles, California. And every Sunday, I do City Sunday, and this is where I will talk about a topic. And today we're going to talk about Arab culture and our relationships, particularly our romantic partnerships. So whether you are, hi Mira, good to see you. Where are you coming in from? Anybody that's interested in sharing where you are coming in from, that would be great. Let's create community here. Anybody from outside of the United States? Nobody wants to share? Egypt, I love it. Welcome. All right, well, then maybe we can start with questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as I start to talk about, from Poland, welcome, welcome, welcome. That's awesome. Love to see that. So we're going to talk about Arab culture and our relationships. Because we come from a very collective culture, all the cultural norms and expectations can have a significant impact on our romantic partnerships and our marriages if you're married. And if you're dating and you're moving towards marriage, I have some things for you to consider. But before we get started, I wanted to ask a question. What type of messages did you receive around relationships? Were they positive messages that marriage is a beautiful thing? Were that you can grow with your partner? Or were some of the messages, this is something you have to do? I just wanted to get a pulse from people because I know there's generational differences. And my generation typically was, you did not date. I mean, we did, but it was hidden, right? And you got married. That was it. I don't know if generationally that has shifted. So if anyone wanted to chime in, that would be great. What type of messages did you receive surrounding relationships? Because it's these messages that very well dictate how you move in your future partnership. Now, many times people think, you have to do it. Oh yeah, that's a given. I'm definitely going to talk about that. In our culture, don't dare, no American boys. Oh, that's right. No American boys. That's right. You don't date outside the culture. I'll talk about that. Yes. Is it shell? Yes, foundation for a good relationship, but incompatible partner can ruin the family. That is a given, and we will definitely talk about that. Oh yeah, don't date. Definitely don't date, right? So it's these messages, or if your mother had messages towards men, el-Islam atlian, right? They're no good. Or if you had messages that men don't do nothing, right? or you cannot live your life without a man. These messages could create a lot of how you see yourself moving into this relationship. Now, for guys, the messages could be very different. So the number one thing, and I think you guys already mentioned, you marry no matter what. As much as I wanted to get married when I was younger, all my cousins got married young. They were having children. Of course, there was a part of me that wanted to explore my career. I wanted to travel. I wanted to do things. I wanted to expand. I had 2 master's degrees by the time I was 35. And my tete would cry to me. She would cry, tears. Yeah, tete, basi jawazi. And I would say, tete, I have 2 masters. I'm traveling. I have a career. She goes, la. All of that, all my accomplishments were negated because I was not married. Now, as self-assured as I was, as independent as I was, there was this part of me that felt like a failure. I failed my family. I failed my community because we were taught you marry no matter what. And so at one point she said to me, it jawazi a ishi, she would say, just marry anything. And what she meant was, he didn't have to be a Arabi. Now, look at the layers for those of you that aren't married and you're in your 30s. And this goes for guys and girls because I hear the same thing with guys. I'm just using myself as an example. Like he didn't, like, a ishi. And I said, I'm worth a ishi? Like then it started to impact my self-worth that let me just jawaz a ishi just so I could get married and have children. She made it very clear, haram tet. I love my teta. When I say these things, I say it with love. That's just how they were. She made it very clear I was too old for Arabi men, right? Because they wanted somebody young who could give them children. And at that time, I was 33 years old. Okay? So if you're feeling like a failure because you're not married by a certain age, I want you to know you are not a failure. Your self-worth does not have to be defined by this cultural message, you marry no matter what. And so you have to remember, if you are married and you got married young, there also may be a sense of loss. Because perhaps you wanted to pursue something or do something. And you felt, I needed to get married, and perhaps maybe you weren't ready and you just rolled with it. And that's okay too. I just want to thread out for you guys, what does all this mean to you? Let's see, Falling Star, I just want to see this comment. They wrote me off. Oh yeah, I was written off too. Don't worry, Habibti. I was written off too. They want to marry me off to some old guy with no... oh, right. And do it, yeah. I have plenty of stories around that. And I was like, are you serious, Teta? You are scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Scraping the bottom of the barrel. So, but what does that mean? So your self-worth, if it's tied to being married, then your worth is tied to having children. So now you're married, but if you don't have children right away, then now there's something wrong with you. And then for many of us in our culture, not only is your worth tied to having children, but it's tied to having sons. So then if you're an Arabi guy and you're married and you're only producing daughters, well, that's a whole other on who you are. But I'll talk about that a little later. So how many of you have felt like a failure or a disappointment to your community for not being married or not being married at a certain age? I think a few of you echoed that. And if you are married, how many of you have felt judged for not being married? For not having children right away. It's like my mom made a joke. She goes, within the first month, if you didn't have kids, they thought, oh, is she Malik, right? Always the woman, usually. it's on the woman, right? They seem to forget about science, that really a lot of that is the gender is dictated by the man, but we'll pin that. How many of you, my mother, just on this issue of gender, because this is how, you also feel like a bad example to your younger cousins. Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to give you a different reframe on that. What the younger generation has said to me, and I didn't know this until much later, was that I was the one example in the family that did different, and it gave them permission to see life in a different way. So I hear what you're saying. Oh, I know. You said the one cousin did everything right and couldn't have kids. And this is where doing everything right, and then something happens, and all of a sudden, now those failure pictures come up. I'm not worthy come up. And this is why when we tie our self-worth to cultural norms and expectations, that is a very dangerous game. That is a very, very dangerous game for your emotional health and well-being. And this is why I'm bringing all this up, so that you can ask yourself, is my self-worth tied to what these expectations are of me? And if I didn't fulfill them, well, what does that mean? Yeah, exactly. So let's keep going. One thing that's important for the Arab women that are on this live is around our self-worth as women. And this, I don't know how much this has changed, but my mother says she remembers a time when the community did not congratulate anyone if they had a girl. So I told my mom, I said, Yama, so out the gate, when I was born, it was like I wasn't even seen or heard, or it was like I didn't exist. She goes, yeah, they didn't congratulate if you were a girl. In fact, they didn't even show up at the hospital. Only when there was a son. And she would hear phrases like, Rajruha. Rajruha means to return her. And I know that this Rajruha echoes within many of our DNA and our cellular structure. That even being born into this life, the energy that's thrown to you is you are not worthy. And I'm encouraging all of you, please do not do that to the next generation. Do not do that. And if you hear any aunties or anybody say, Rajruha, Mish Sabi, maybe the next one's Sabi, find your own language, gently, lovingly, or ignore them, whatever you want to do. However, to nip that in the bud, to protect your children and to affirm them. And even if they hear Ishihiak, you turn your kid around and you look at them in the eye and you say, this is a teaching moment, Habibti or Habibi. You are worthy no matter what. And it's important to instill that, because of the generational trauma, to instill that in your children over and over and over again. And if you don't have children, you instill that in yourself over and over and over again. Because you marry no matter what, and maybe you don't want to get married. There's plenty of Arab men that I spoke to and Arab women. They're like, Tiff, I don't have a maternal bone in my body. I have no interest in marriage. I'm interested in partnership and to be with my partner, but I have no interest in anything relating to marriage. And I said, that's great. So how can you honor what you want for yourself while still balancing the needs of the culture? And so that's what I call Arabi finesse. Inshallah fi nasib. Like, everybody takes it negatively. I said, oh yeah, auntie, inshallah, please. I used to tell them that. Oh, please, auntie, is it fi nasib, right? You turn it around so you empower yourself with that. Versus seeing it as a negative where people get so upset You're getting upset because what it's triggering in you is that failure picture or that disappointment. So once you can lean into that, heal that for yourself, these things like, oh, nasib and inshallah and akbalak or akbalik won't be as triggering for you. And it's the same thing if you're married and you don't have children, they'll say the same thing. Lean into that for you. Now, I've had many uncles who only had girls. Now, this goes for the men too. It's like we come from a culture where their masculinity was questioned. It was awful. And I made a joke. I make a joke to a lot of the older uncles. I go, who's there to take care of you? Your sons? At least in my generation, it's the banat that are taking care of them. So I said, for all your legacy and the men and your boys, when hinna. I'm not saying that's true in all families, but in my experience, professionally and personally, the majority of that falls upon the daughters. All right, let's keep going. So I think someone already mentioned this. You must marry within the culture. And in at least within my experience, it's clan. You marry, we're very clannish still as a society. You marry within the clan. You have to marry within certain family names because of status or reputation. It's like you couldn't go outside the clan names. Religion. Excuse me. There was a time, my family, like my grandfather, you couldn't even marry outside the town because they didn't trust people outside of that. Social status, right? We come from a culture where social status is really, really important. And so if you married outside of that, you can get a lot of pushback. Let me see what Janet said. Yeah, good family. Who cares how they treat you? Oh my gosh. I talk about that. You can, بس هو دكتور محامي. But he's abusive, or he's narcissistic, or he doesn't know how to treat you. But that's okay. هو دكتور, هو محامي. And then what do you do as a woman? Or for the men, when women are looking, because they're forced to look at these social status structures, for the guys that own their small businesses or the guys that are doing something outside of those acceptable careers, are they overlooked as a result of not being of status? We need to be really careful in how we assess all of this. Yeah, thank you, Janet, for sharing. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, marrying within the culture. I have long felt that marrying within the culture is easier in a lot of ways. You don't have to explain yourself. He understands or he or she understands the cultural norms and expectations and customs without explanation. So in many ways, marrying within our culture with the right person, with a good fit, can make things easier. Traditions with the children, traditions with the family are a beautiful thing with the right person. Now, when I married my daughter's father, who was Puerto Rican, because, GBA Ishi, right? Jipte Ishi, so Jiptada. And they valued family. However, it was a constant argument around my family obligations because he didn't want to participate. I had to explain, no, lazim, we have to do this. Well, why do we have to do this? It was just constant bickering around that, and it was exhausting. Now, he couldn't understand why he couldn't say no to certain events. And at some point, I gave up, and I just said, just don't go. I'll go. And I was a single married woman for many years up until my divorce. And you hear countless stories from people who married non-Arab and the struggles that they dealt with trying to explain cultural norms and expectations. And that could be very, very difficult. Excuse me, sorry, I'm still struggling with the flu. For men, now, sorry, let me go back. For those who married within our culture, there's also a whole set of issues. What do you guys think those issues are? When you marry within the culture, for those of you that are married or dating within the culture, what are some of the issues? You mentioned good family, right? But he was abusive. How do you get out of that? Anybody want to share? The question is, when you marry within the culture, what are some of the issues that come up? Yes, mother-in-law. I have a whole section on the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law dynamic, because that's a tough one. If you have anything that you come up with. So let me keep going. So as a woman, there's an underlining message that you no longer belong to your family, that you now belong to his family. And for many women who are connected and close to their family, that could be very disorienting, especially if you moved out of state or moved to another country. That could feel very isolating, very lonely, even if you have a good relationship with this family. Many times this manifests in experiencing depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and in some cases, and I'm sorry if this is triggering people, suicidality, because the feelings of isolation, and then in cases of abuse, and where does she turn? How many stories, countless stories I've heard from Arabi women who say to me, I went to my family. I think it's better in the next generation. I do think it's better. They would go to their family and they say, he's abusing me, he's hurting me. What do? They minimize, they invalidate, they say, Ma'alash, yi la dirjai. And they say, you better go back and fix it. Like it's on you to fix. And so that level or lack of support can feel profoundly isolating. Many men who are married to these women are very ill-equipped to be able to manage the depression, the anxiety. A lot of them inadvertently negate her feelings, invalidate her feelings. And this leads to, in the marriage, sometimes out the gate, very early, it leads to resentment and disconnection within the marriage very early on. So what were you talking about? Even when you marry within the culture, where do you go to get support if you're having marital issues? Who can you talk to when they shame you or they minimize or they're protecting the good family name? Now, for any young person who is, the other point is if you're also marrying a relative. I know that doesn't happen as much now as it did before. However, if you do marry a relative, imagine the multi-layers coming when you're married to somebody within your family. Sometimes I've seen it both ways, where it's hindered and helped in some ways. And if she's from if she's from an Arab country and comes here, or if he's from an Arab country and comes here, or she's here, right? There could be acculturation differences. There could be, even though they both speak English, right? There could be language barriers as well. And so you could see where these multi-layered stressors, when you marry within the culture, especially if the families are feuding. Yeah. If they're feuding, what happens? It causes a lot of stress in the marriage. Now, many times for the young people, dating is often hidden. It's the out-of-be finesse. They either lie to their parents, they hide their partner because they don't want the pressure initially of because dating is often pursued with marriage in mind rather than casual relationships. We don't do casual relationships. It's seen as it's seen as something negative. So you date to marry. So that's why a lot of young people, I see them, they hide their relationships, they keep them hidden, and they can do that for years. And so what does that mean? It means growing up, if you weren't allowed to date, or if you're not allowed to date, it may stunt what you seek in a relationship. So it's like you date and you marry and you have limited experience and you don't know yourself enough in relationship, and you have a guy who's not open, who's not curious, who's not willing to work with you on that, you're going to have a real hard time. A real hard time. So also in this developmental, what I've seen too is no premarital sex or touching. That is like a big taboo. If you did any of those things, especially as a woman, you were seen as what? What are some of the labels? Slut, sharmuta, excuse my language, but this is what we say to women or young women if they're just doing normal exploration of who they are. So what happens is, because of these labels, if a girl, a young woman, sleeps with a guy, especially if he's out-of-be, she will feel so much shame, even though it was like normal sexual exploration, that she will marry him out of obligation, and vice versa. Sometimes the guy will go, oh, I took her virginity, I don't want to do that to her, let's get married, even though they both know they're the wrong fit. But because of these labels that we have within our culture, and the fear of being known as, a trollop, or, God forbid, you're in touch with your sensuality or sexuality. And I've seen the consequence of that in our many out-of relationships is in the bedroom, in sexual intimacy. Many women will talk about feeling uncomfortable in their bodies in the bedroom. Even if they are attracted and they love their partner, they don't feel free to express themselves in that way. And so that can cause a lot of issues in the bedroom. And again, if you have a partner that is open and communicative and willing to work with you on that shame and to help open you up, pun intended, to help open you up, right? That could be a very healing and beautiful thing. Now, if this is conversations making anybody feel uncomfortable, I get that. We don't talk about sex in our culture. We don't talk about sexuality or sensuality. However, when it comes to marriage as a goal, I'm just letting you know some of these labels around dating and the limitations around that can have significant impact on marital satisfaction in the bedroom. Let me look at some of the comments here. Yes, that's right. Get married, get out of the house, and then you're expected to have sex. And then nobody has even remotely talked to you about that. Whatever you learned. I know for us when we were younger, we learned through magazines. Back then there wasn't an internet, and we would learn through magazines, and we were curious. It was something very normal, and so. But again, it had a lot of implications on that because Arab plays a big role in the lack of fun in the bedroom. So I'm really hoping that you have partners or you choose partners who are open to talk about those things so that you can heal, both of you can heal in that regard and have more satisfaction in that way. I have not heard too many stories of Arab men gently helping women overcome that. Maybe the younger generation. but definitely the older generation. I haven't heard too many stories where a man was sensitive to that. If anything, she was shamed even further. And it's because of their lack of attunement, right? If you have a man in your life who doesn't attune to you, that could be a problem. And vice versa for the guys. If you have a partner who's not attuned to you, again, it causes a lot of problems. Oh my gosh, I could hear my teta in my ear right now. She's saying, "Yee, Tef, you had the hockey. What are you saying? You're talking about these things." I can hear her like right here in the back of my head. One thing to remember, when you are in a partnership or you are in a relationship, when you marry them, you marry their family. Because we come from a collective culture where the families are combined and they're enmeshed and they're together, you have to choose wisely. Don't just look at him. Don't just be enamored with him, right? Do not overlook his extended family as well. You look at his siblings. You look at the relationship he has with them. You look at the relationship he has with his mother, and vice versa. For the guys, you look at her relationships. You take a look. How does she move in the world? And because there's a lot of women that are very unhealthy out there. And I think that's what I see collectively online and social media. All the guys are like, all these banats, all they want is materialism and the LV bags and high end, and they're not really interested in connecting. I don't know how true that is, but I think there's a lot of miscommunication between men and women around that. So let's keep going. So when you marry his family, you marry him too. If they're like very gossipy, if the aunties and amos, they can cause a lot of stress in the marriage with their haki. And so you want to be really careful about gossip, the people that stir the pot, the jealousies. And if you're a beautiful, capable woman, you got to be real careful, because a lot of them, they don't like that. They want you like that. This is the culture of dichotomy. They want you, Hank, but then they resent you for being who you are. Now, if you have a partner who's not supportive, who does not protect you, who will side with his family over you, this can cause a lot of harm in the marriage and with trust. And I'm letting you know, you will suffer in that type of dynamic. You will. And many of you already have. You said they would, let's see, Janet, you said, right, if you missed a family dinner on his side, they would shame me and made me feel like I was doing something wrong. Yeah, because of the level of control. I see a lot of young people shunning marriage and healthy relationships, and the fear of becoming like their parents. Many of them fear being in a toxic relationship. Others fear being with the wrong person and getting stuck. As I mentioned earlier, many focus on the material and social status of a person versus who they are. And I see so much judgment in relation. I mean, I have saved plenty of relationships where people were dating a very nice guy or a very nice girl, and they're like, "Oh, but he doesn't take me to fancy dinners." I said, "Yeah, but he writes you beautiful poetry. Ish biddik. Fancy dinners?" Like, assess your priorities and your values. What is important to you? Because at the end of the day, the fancy dinners do nothing for you. It's how he treats you or how she treats you. Any questions so far before I keep going? Anybody have any questions around our culture and romantic partnerships and relationships? One of the things that, feel free to chime in with any questions and I'll get to them. I have heard many Arab that I've met, have met the love of their life within the culture. They met this man or woman, they were in love, they had a good relationship, and guess what? The mom didn't like her, or the mom didn't like him, or the dad didn't like him. Okay? So look what happens. Now they break up because we have this cultural expectation. You do not disobey your parents. You do, your parents' approval is highly valued. You let go of this relationship that you love, of this person that you love. I see this more in men. Many of the guys, they don't get married after that. The damage was so profound that they just shut down, and their nervous systems go, I don't want to do this again. And it's very sad to see. I've seen, probably this is the hardest one that I've seen. Banat Arab, they fell in love with somebody outside the culture. And their families were not accepting of that. And the man loved them. They loved him. And then they end up marrying Wahad Arabi because that's what the culture said. And they're miserable and they're unhappy. And it's the unrequited love that all they're thinking about this other man. And I've talked to people 20 years later. They'll say, I never forgot her. I've always loved her. And her family would never accept me. And many of them never got married. Those men never got married. Which I understand because I'm biased. But I think a lot of Niswan al-Arab are the best. We are loyal. We do everything for you. We will do everything for you against ourselves, which is another problem in another video. And so now, while it may not be recognized, I hope it's recognized with men within our culture. Many times it's not. But to men outside the culture, they embrace it in a lot of ways because they're not used to that level of acts of service. Does that make sense? So I'm affirming who we are as women. And 20 years later, I have men, oh man, this Palestinian girl I was dating, or this Jordanian girl I was dating, or this Lebanese woman I was dating. How many stories have I heard where they're still thinking about them? So for the young people who are perhaps on this, I'm going to let you know that the parents' influence when they say, mish hello, too dark, too skinny, too this, too that, all their judgment on stuff that doesn't matter. I want you to trust how you feel within yourself, that if he makes you feel safe, loved, seen, heard, doesn't matter what he looks like. It doesn't matter what he does for a living. As long as you both are moving together. Very rarely do I hear in our community the character of the person. Let's see. How do I integrate with my husband's family? His mother approves, but I haven't met his extended family, and I'm not very feminine. I don't think I fit the role that they'd like me to fill. I'm going to encourage you to be who you are. Be who you are. Stand in, if they want you to be, I don't know, not very, I don't know what, like the tip, the woo, the maquillage, they have the makeup and suited and booted. And if that's not who you are, stand in who you are, because it's on your husband. It is on your husband to stand with you in that and to protect you from that. That's not for you. You just do you and be you, whether they accept you or not, the extended family. If his mother approves, you're already winning. Everyone else, I'm going to encourage you, unless they have some closeness to your husband, or unless they matter to you guys they matter as far as the culture, but if they don't really, try not to allow their opinions but don't change who you are because of them. Don't try and become something to please them. I'm really going to encourage you not to do that. That's exhausting. It's inauthentic. Sometimes we play some role, and you maybe just for that day, okay, let me just kind of please them. If you choose to do that for you, not the other way around. Was that helpful? Yeah. To try and, we come from a culture where they're constantly moving the goalpost. You will never win that. You will never win that. I can almost guarantee you. And anybody chime in, correct me if I'm wrong. They will constantly move that feminine. Okay, you dress hick. They're, oh, how come ich labse hick? Or, oh, yeah. Don't worry about that. And really, it's your husband to stand by your side in that. And then to set boundaries as needed. All right, we're almost done here. Let's keep going. I want to talk about the role of the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. Now, we come from a patriarchal society, yet in traditional Arab families, the mother-in-law often holds a respected position as the matriarch in the family. Now, this is where I say the healing, even though we are in a patriarchal culture, the healing comes from the women in a lot of ways, in how we move to shift things because of this respected position as the matriarch. Now, she can either make your life very easy or make your life extremely difficult. She also may feel responsible to ensure her son's well-being, to uphold family tradition. Now, with that said, many mother-in-laws within our culture protect their sons at all costs. So they may struggle with drug addiction, intimate partner violence is minimized, gambling addiction, mental health issues that were masked or not disclosed, fertility issues. In some cases, they will blame the daughter-in-law for not fixing him or even causing his problems, which I'm here to tell you, trust me, his problems came along long before you came around. Believe me, I can almost guarantee that. You did not cause his problems. Now, the marriage may have a dynamic that has problems, but you did not cause his problems. And families, Arabi families, many times will protect the preservation of the reputation of the family without getting resources and support that may be needed. So you may feel very isolated and alone if you're in this particular dynamic. Now, the daughter-in-law, and I think, Shell, you mentioned that, is expected to integrate into the husband's family, often taking on roles of, more traditional, household management, caregiving, social isolation, social obligations. And as I mentioned before, it's your husband's responsibility to help with that integration. And again, the degree of his emotional intelligence will play a big role in the health of that integration. Many men, and so if I could be on the guys' team for a minute here, many men within our culture feel torn between their mothers and their wives. And it's this power dynamic that becomes very intense. And a mother-in-law might struggle to adjust to her son's wife, becoming the new primary woman in his life. And this can create feelings of competition and control. Now, if you're the daughter-in-law, understand that for her role, I'm not excusing negative behavior. I'm not excusing poor behavior. This is not what I'm suggesting. But in order for us to heal, in order for us to move forward, because of our closeness of our culture, it's about what can you do within yourself to understand that she's in fear. She's struggling with the competition. She may say comments, but nick, right? She's nicking. Now, if you're not grounded in who you are, she could say, if you're grounded in who you are, she could say whatever she wants. The extended family can say whatever they want. But if you know within yourself, no, I know who I am. That's why the more you have self-awareness, the more you can have self-reflection, the more you could stand in who you are, the less likely their haki may impact you. Now, with that said, it's hurtful, it's painful. But again, if you want to move through that, it's about you working on yourself around that. Many times in our culture, in general, the expectations are unrealistic about what a daughter-in-law's role is in the family and what they're expected to do. And this can lead to misunderstandings and a lot of pressure. The pressure to be perfect, the pressure to look good, cook good, have your household, have your kids in ratbiyan. You have all these pressures. And then on top of that, many work. And it's how do you manage all of it and still maintain your sanity? And many times you're doing this alone and without support. That's why I created this community. So that at least you can come on here and hear my voice and get some support that these dynamics and this navigation is extremely difficult. But because we minimize and we ignore and we deny the impact, we have these revved up nervous systems that we're overriding, and then you wonder why you can't sleep, you can't eat, you're mnetiviz or you're working too much or engaging in food, emotional eating. It leads to all these things. These dynamics lead to more significant emotional health issues that we ignore because it's normal. It's our culture. That's just the way it is. And I'm saying, why does it have to be that way? If we can give each tools on how to stand in who you are and say, okay, I see you, Auntie, you're afraid, or I see you, Auntie, you want to control, or and you allow them. My friend Grace and I, she coined the phrase "Khalihum mabsutin." It's like bihku, and then it's sort of our like tongue in cheek, "Khalihum mabsutin." And I guess Mel Robbins, the popular coined phrase, at least here in the United States, is let them be who you are. Let them be who they are. But what can you do within yourself so that you're not allowing their words to hurt you or impact you? Now, on a positive note around our culture and relationships, when it's healthy and whole and supportive, it's the most beautiful thing. Our shared traditions, our family celebrations, our cooking together, our sharing of stories. And this strengthens our relationships, not just within our families, but even outside, that we have this anchor that we could tether to. It's the roots of the tree. And we are all the roots, and the culture is what grows. But what are we growing? What kind of fruit do we want these trees to bear? Not only for ourselves, but for our children. And a lot of it is, how do we strengthen these family ties and foster harmony and really understand the generations, understand these dynamics, and more importantly, understand yourself. If you're so desperate that you want to get married that you're going to overlook, I did that. You're going to overlook a lot of stuff just so you could say, yeah, Anaja was it. And I had a baby. I'm going to say, be really careful around that. And if that's the road you go down, know that you may have a hard time. Or to the guy who's 40 and not married, and you're you have to hear this, and then it creates a shame. And how do you move through that? But I was talking about the importance of strengthening our family ties from a place of understanding, compassion, and no judgment. So remembering too, the last piece before I hop off is many families' generational traumas are different than others. So be mindful of the family's history. The more trauma, the more difficult they may have in articulating their needs, articulating their feelings. And really, again, they could be where they're at if they're not willing to look at their trauma or address their trauma or process their trauma. But how can you stay whole within yourself as these dynamics are playing out? And how could you stay present and not contribute to the chaos? And how can you bring more peace? And that I can't give you that. Only you could answer that, for yourself around that. Any questions? I'm going to end with this. A healthy partnership, whether you're Arab or not, and I cannot emphasize this enough, it begins with each individual doing their own self-reflection, doing their own work in their own healing journey, and then coming together and working together. And sometimes you're figuring it out with your partner. You're saying, I was never taught this. And he goes, I was never taught this. Well, how can you come together and learn? And there's so many resources. Read a couples book together. Listen to a podcast together. Sharing your vulnerabilities, which is very difficult for us in our culture, but it's in the sharing of the vulnerability to say, hey, I got upset when your mom said this because it really hurt me. It triggered whatever it was when you were a kid. And then you work with your partner, but he needs to have an understanding of where the trigger comes from. For the guys, your partner needs to understand the triggers within you. If you guys don't have that language, or if one person is in the boat rowing the oar, what happens? The boat goes in circles. You can't row a boat with one oar. Together, you row it. And people always think that a healthy marriage or a healthy partnership begins with love. And I say no. It begins with safety. Can you feel safe? And that safety means, can you feel seen? Can you feel heard? Does your body feel at peace when you're with him or when you're with her? And if you don't feel that safety in your body, that's an indicator that you may need to point to areas where your relationship needs healing, or a relationship you really need to revisit. And if you're already in it and you're in the Arabic culture and you feel stuck and you're in this marriage till the very end, this is where you can gently, and it takes time, you're planting seeds with your partner. You're planting seeds. And I'm not here to tell you, it is a long road, depending on his emotional intelligence or her emotional intelligence. And if the woman exhibits any toxic behavior, personality disorder, any of those things, I tell all the guys, proceed with caution. She may be gorgeous from head to toe, labsa, heck, and you're like, ooh, but if she's stirring the pot, it's going to create a lot of problems for you later on. So for anyone that is interested, on January 22nd, that's on Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 7:30 Pacific time, I'm conducting, speaking of the nervous system and safety, my colleague Nina Bratcher and I are doing regulating your autonomic nervous system. So if you're interested in that, hop on my website. Feel free to sign up. It will give you an understanding of creating that safety within you and tools on how to manage anxiety, depressive symptoms. And this is a really great practical workshop if you're interested in joining. Another thing that I'm doing is on February 5th from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. I'm looking for 8 to 10 participants. I'm doing a Middle Eastern support group. I haven't heard anybody doing anything like this. It's where you meet with me weekly. It's via Zoom. It's online. And we work in a small group setting, taking a look at your symptoms, taking a look at what's not working in your life, looking at these cultural messages and norms, looking at your relationships, and coming together collectively to share our stories, and then how can we move through them in a way that balances our individualism and the belonging of our culture, which I think many Western therapists overlook. That for us, that sense of belonging is really, really important. And how do we navigate those two things? So again, I'm really excited about this program, and I hope that someone would be inspired to join it. It's going to be really awesome. All right, everybody, that's the end of time. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate each and every one of you. This community is such a blessing to me on so many levels, to be able to share what I know and how we can heal together. Have a great Sunday. Take care, everybody.